something from World War II, Peter.
Chris, can you tell me, it's a little hard to tell on television, how much of the building has collapsed? How wide is it? How deep is it? Do you have a sense of that?
Yes, I do, Peter. The center portion of the Pentagon appears to be breached. That is, apparently there's a courtyard, and the of that is completely caved in from where I am, from where I see it.
Okay, I think you're on a cell phone, Chris, but just confirm for me that a portion of the building has been breached and the aircraft appears to have pushed its way through into the courtyard?
Yes, indeed it has. I believe, Peter, that that's where the plane is, but I am not sure at this time.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. Is there any evidence, is there any movement around there at the moment? We're looking at a fairly static picture. Are there people arriving, people disappearing, ambulances coming?
Peter, there's a great deal of glass and wind fire coming out of the windows, but on the other side of the Pentagon is where most of the emergency vehicles are now. I'm going to try and get around to that side to see what I can see.
Okay, thank you very much. I should tell you that all military personnel in the District of Columbia area now, all military personnel in the district, are now on something that is called Threat Level Delta, which is the highest state of alert in the military, and all other people, all other military personnel in the country are now on alert status Charlie, which, John Miller, we know is a somewhat lower status of alert, but still a reminder that this disaster has spread like wildfire through all of the political and military establishment in the country. All museums and monuments in Washington are now shut for the day. It's ironic to hear Claire Shipman telling us there that tourists are still standing around waiting to get into the White House today, not surprisingly, unfamiliar perhaps with what has happened everywhere else, though, as it was, for example, when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, word spread dramatically, mouth to mouth, person to person across the country in a huge wave of information and emotion and confusion. And now I just want to sort of, as often happens, to contradict some of the earlier reporting from Washington. Our State Department sources now believe that there was no car bomb at the State Department, as was reported a little earlier by a number of sources in Washington. We believe there was no car bomb at the State Department, so the State Department at this point is free of violence, but it has been evacuated, as has the Congress, as has the Treasury building. And we've told you several times that the leadership of the House and the Senate, at least the Senate anyway, have been taken to a location which is deemed to be secure. There is still some concern among our intelligence sources in Washington that one more aircraft somewhere is unaccountable, or is unaccounted for, I should just say. Pierre Thomas, I know you're talking as best you can under the circumstances to all of your sources in the FBI. This is your beat. What are they telling you, if anything?
Well, early on today, they were saying that they thought that there was at least one hostage situation in terms of the plane being hijacked, but they were scrambling just as we are, trying to get additional communication, trying to get additional information, and that's one of the problems early on in a disaster like this, is they're trying to get the information in, they're trying to sort through what they have, and then make decisions based on that.
Okay, but does it appear to be an orderly procedure as far as you can tell throughout the country?
Yes, what they do in these cases, the Special Operations Center, which is based at the FBI headquarters in Washington, will go on full alert. The FBI Director, Deputy Director Tom Picard will come down. They will begin to communicate with their facilities throughout the U.S. It's interesting to note, Bob Mueller, the FBI, new director of the FBI,
hardly been on the job at all.
Has not been on the job more than 2 weeks. So he's now being baptized by fire in terms of how to deal with a crisis like this.
Okay, Pierre, thanks very much. Pierre Thomas, who covers the Justice Department and is sitting here working the phones, trying to get through. Because in some respects, what you're looking at on television, with the one exception of the collapse of the buildings in New York City in the last hour, it doesn't begin to convey, and nor can we, the tension in the country from everywhere, because you not only have something happening, but you have all of this reporting coming in from otherwise, from respectable intelligence, information, police agencies saying there are other things to be worried about. John Miller, who's sitting with me, covering New York City in his ear, because he knows these police networks so well, had a sense that the second tower was going to go, and other people must have had the same thing.
They did. The first indication was they started to broadcast reports that they felt it was leaning and that there was a buckle in the northwest corner. And then as you and I were speaking live, they said it's going, and it went.
On the phone with us, I think from Washington at the moment, is Vince Canestraro, with whom we often discuss matters of terrorism. Vince, can you hear me? Vince, can you hear me? Vince Canestraro? Okay, when we make it.
One thing that's...
Vince, can you hear me, Vince Canestraro?
Yes, I can.
Okay, well, I don't know what else to do at the moment except to ask your observations on this, because... Just go ahead.
Well, it's a pretty stunning event, a sequence of events. I think most of the intelligence information available to the U.S. government pointed at attacks at U.S. installations abroad, most recently in Asia. I think that no one had really anticipated a major attack on U.S. soil.
Why not? Come on, Vince. Why not? Why should in the wake of Oklahoma City, in the wake of the attack on the trade towers, and all this talk about international terrorism with its tentacles everywhere, why did nobody anticipate it happening here?
I think they anticipated only more sophisticated biological or chemical attacks from terrorist groups. But this was a series of attacks using conventional means. Hijacked plane, suicide bombers. I don't think anyone in the intelligence community really anticipated that the terrorist groups that they had identified had the capability to do these kinds of events inside the United States. Now, were they wrong? Obviously. And should they have anticipated a level of cooperation among alienated groups, terrorist groups that wanted to punish the United States? Certainly, they should have. But I don't think anyone anticipated that any of the groups could have done this kind of coordinated, synchronized terrorist events.
I want to know more about that, Vincent. I don't mean to have you have to defend the intelligence community, but we hear this all the time. Groups are not sophisticated to do this. Did the intelligence community fall in love with the notion of biological and chemical attacks and not anticipate that guys could hijack airplanes? They've been doing it since the 1970s.
I don't think there's any question about that. They were anticipating new kinds of threats. All the money in the counterterrorism budget went towards preparation for a BW or nuclear attacks on U.S. soil. But what we have seen time and time again, that terrorists are able to exploit conventional materials in a very devastating way. What McVeigh did at Oklahoma City in 1995, using commercially available materials to some devastating effect, although they weren't the casualties that we see today. But 1993,
Hey, but Vince, let me interrupt you for a second, and I apologize. I sound like on the attack here, but there's a feeling in that. You notice I haven't called anybody a terrorism expert this morning.
I don't think anyone wants to be known as a terrorism expert.
Thank you very much. And
today.
but we have a series of terrorism experts who appear in our lives and sometimes sound off knowledgeably. I exclude you from this, by the way, otherwise I wouldn't raise it in your precedent. Sound off, knowledgeably about how we know this group and that group and that group. And this is, among other things, a desperate failure of intelligence in both the human and technical area. Am I right?
There's no question about it, Peter. It's a major intelligence failure, the inability to anticipate this kind of a terrorism event on U.S. soil. I think that they were focused on bin Laden in Afghanistan. They were focused on U.S. facilities abroad, and I don't think they believed that bin Laden or a consortium of groups collaborating together had the capability or the willingness to do this kind of thing. Is that a false assumption? Obviously. Yeah. We saw what they did with the USS Cole last year. It was a very sophisticated U.S. warship that was almost totally destroyed with the loss of 17 lives by suicide bombers.
And just one other thing before I let you go back and work the beat for us, if you would, and that is Osama bin Laden. some of my colleagues and I argue here about the U.S. emphasis on bin Laden. It's bin Laden, bin Laden, bin Laden. It's if the United States gets only one focus at a time in terms of somebody involved in terrorism. Has the intelligence community fallen in love with the notion that only bin Laden can do this?
No, I don't think they have. They certainly have focused on bin Laden as the bête noire and as the architect of terrorism against U.S. officials, U.S. citizens. But in this case, the resources and the coordination and the direction to do these kinds of events requires capabilities beyond any one single group. In other words, there had to be cooperation, possibly with some state support, to do this kind of thing.
Okay.
I mean, we've been hearing for the last 2 months that bin Laden was getting ready to do something, but I don't think anyone was looking here as the object of his next event.
Okay, Vince, I much appreciate it, and I hope you go work the beat for us and you check back with us.